Okay. Oh, it went on the wrong screen. Thanks. Thanks. PowerPoint. There we go. All right. So, as Don mentioned, if you've got questions along the way, please ask them. These sessions are way more enjoyable when they're interactive. Raise your hand. We'll call on you, have you come off mute, do something, that kind of stuff. So, my name is Richard Brynteson. I am located in beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can find me in all sorts of places, Twitter, my blog, on GitHub, all the kind of normal places. And I am a MVP in the Office Apps and Services, whatever that means in this day and age. I just write teams because that's just easier to remember. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take this as a crawl, walk, run kind of scenario. So we're going to talk about what are approvals. We're going to talk about what was announced at Ignite 2021. We're going to go through demos and we're going to write these basically together live. So what could possibly go wrong with that scenario? But we're gonna do these together so you can kind of think about how these would work, because the idea is, I could show you slides of it, but I'd rather show you what it actually looks like in the real world. So we'll get out of PowerPoint. We'll dig into some of the Ignite stuff about templates, and then if there's time at the end, I have another kind of Power Automate fun. And the interesting thing about approvals is, if you're not familiar with what approvals are, approvals, I don't know if they're technically part of Power Automate. I guess they are. I guess they're not, like, they're their own app. But without Power Automate, you can only get so far. So we're going to talk about both of them in this case. We're going to talk about approvals, and we're going to talk about Power Automate and how the two together with Flow kind of do some cool things. So what are approvals? The first thing is there is an app in the Microsoft Teams App Center, or the App Store, that gives you a single place to see all of your approvals, those that are existing, those that are in process, pretty much everything you might want to see in a singular place. You can send your approvals from chat, you can do it from team messages, you can do it all sorts of different places. And then we have these ideas of approval cards, and you'll kind of see those as well. So I just want to kind of level set, what some of the terminology is, so that you can think about as we go through it. The next item is, why do we use approvals? I'm going to come back to this slide at the end because I think it answers itself, but we'll come back to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this idea of crawl, walk, run. So we're going to start in Teams and just use Teams only. How would that look like? How does that work? Then we're going to do a walk example. How do we combine Teams with Power Automate and do a simple example? And the last one, we're going to do some really kind of detailed, multi-level approval process in it. And I always think it's fun to have some sort of example to kind of base this on. Otherwise, we're kind of just talking about it in the abstract. So we're gonna build a PTO request, process for your company. So company is looking, they need to be able to, do PTO requests. Right now, maybe they email them or send them via fax, or I don't know how people do it in this day and age. So we're going to use this idea of we need to create a PTO request, and we're going to do that then basically from Teams in our crawl. We're going to use our walk to enhance it, and then we're going to run and do a lot of what I call crazy, stupid stuff. So let's just jump into it. So here's our first workflow. It's going to be really easy. We need a user, they need to request PTO, it needs to be approved in Teams, we see a notification. So we're going to go build that, and we're going to see what that looks like from the Teams environment. So let me grab my user here real quick. This is playing with lots of different browsers today. All right, so I'm logged in here as a user. And when I come in here, I will have my approvals app. So this is sitting off in the side rail. And if I haven't installed it for some reason, you can go ahead and click on it, and that would install it into your organization. Are approvals available in government? I don't think they are right now. I don't remember. I'm going to write it down. I'll loop.
Yeah, we'll look up that one.
Yeah, I don't honestly remember. That's that. I mean, you're familiar. If you've dealt with government, then you're super familiar with the idea of things just come later in life. Same with education. They all play in the same kind of world. All right, so I'm in my approvals. I want to create a new approval request. It's really easy. So I can do it from the approvals app itself. And up at the top, you're going to see this new approval request. And when I click on it, it's going to ask, hey, what kind of approval do you want, right? The e-sign is about the Adobe Sign feature. We won't talk about that. So I'm just going to pick basic. And then we pick a name. All right, so it's going to be a PTO request. I'll spell request correctly for once. And then you enter in who you want this approval to go to. And you can send it to multiple people. So if I wanted to, I could pick a lot of different people in this list and keep going through it. And you'll notice there's an option here that I need to require a response from all approvers. So I could uncheck that if only one of the people need to, or if I needed both of them to, I could do that here as well. So in the real world, in a PTO request, you probably really only have one person that you're seeking approval from. At least in this example, we will. So I'll just leave that one there for now. Then you can put in your additional details. PTO request, I need to take off May 5th. Sound good. Question mark. And you could do fun things, right? You could add an attachment, and you could even go in and customize responses like yes, yeppers, nope, no chance, those kind of things. So we're just going to leave it like that. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to pin it off to the side, and I want to grab this one here because this is logged in as that other person. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit send, and the approval will be created. It'll take a moment. There it goes. And you'll notice over here, right, I got that pop-up notification. I have the approval for my other user, and you'll notice, hey, this user has sent you an approval request. And you'll notice all the items that were there, right? PTO request, I need to take it off, right? Who you sent it to and who it was requested by. When I made the request, you'll notice over here in approvals, it's still in the requested state. So I could go about my business in Teams, and even this user, right? Even if I didn't want to answer it and maybe I was off doing other stuff, I could do things in Teams and do my world. And I could then myself come into the approvals, right, as a manager and say, are there anything that's outstanding? Oh, there's one here that's requested I haven't approved yet. You click on it, it's going to come up and bring you that same UI. Sounds good. Have a great day. And we're going to hit approve. It'll take a moment. And then on the far side, this person will get their notification it was approved. And if I do the same thing and I come back to approvals again, we're going to see in a moment that it'll say approved as soon as it updates the screen. Go, update. I'll hit refresh. Oh, there it goes. Well, at least I got the notification there. It'll update. Trust me. It'll update in Teams time. That should be a new phrase. Teams time. That'd be kind of cool. So that gives us this general idea of how we do really basic stuff. Now, the great thing is you can do these approvals from anywhere. You don't have to just do it from the approvals app. So if I was in chat, right, and I was speaking with this person, or even in a team channel, right, I could go into posts, I could start a new conversation, and down on the bottom is approvals. And when I click on approvals, I would get that same workflow. If I do it here, the card is going to appear inside of the channel itself. So you could say, approve document. Put in who I want to approve it. And do that same send process. And since I've done this from the channel experience, right, now we're going to see it inside of here. And what's great about doing it inside the card is, right, a couple of things. One, we've done it inside the team, so lots of people can see it and approve and react to it. But then I also kind of have this, real world look. So I can see that it's in process. And if I come as the approver and come in here, I'm going to have the option here to approve, reject, or view those details. So as the person who is requested, right, in this case, I can click approve, and we're going to see this card update in live time on the far side. Just like that, you'll see it's been approved, and then we have that kind of workflow happen directly through the team experience. And you can do this at the individual chat level and all those kind of fun things. So that's the really basics of how to do an approval process. All right, I kind of wanted to level set for the room. If you've got questions, ask. But I want to talk about what's coming up with this, because I think that's kind of more the interesting stuff when it comes to this basic portion. So I'm going to dump into the PowerPoint again just for a moment. So at Ignite, they announced a handful of things for approvals to make it even cooler. So you'll be able to create and manage them a lot easier. You'll have the ability to create templates. I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. You'll be able to upload files from OneDrive, and they're going to support Markdown support as well. So what does that process look like? So this is live. This is rolling out really soon. It was announced. Templates were announced at Ignite. It's rolling out mid-May. I begged a bunch of people if they'd let me show this live, and I was told no because it's not public. So I just scoured Twitter and found a bunch of screenshots of other people who've already done it and posted stuff and other Microsoft blogs, and I can give you a virtual representation. So what's going to happen is inside of the Teams client, you're going to find up here at the top, there's going to be this create a request template. All right, so you'll notice that you'll be able to select this option to create an approval template. And what's really cool is that when you create that template, and this is where I think it gets really powerful, is you're going to be able to select where you want that template to exist. So you'll notice that there's org-wide templates. There are specific people that you can make templates for, but you can also make templates then at the team level. And how this works is if you're a team owner, you have the ability to create team templates. So you can start imagining the different scenarios you have now instead of, simply saying, fill out longhand what you want for your template. You could define the criteria on the front end and then play around with that so you can kind of, have that defined request for your organization. Org-wide, you require higher permissions, like a global administrator, and specific people, you can just share them with specific people. So that's kind of how that permissions work. And what's cool then is as you create templates, they just simply appear here in this list. So you start seeing all the different templates that exist in your organization. When you start building the template, what you're going to do is you're going to, give it a name. You're going to be able to pick a category, give it a description so your end users kind of have a context of what's happening for this. And then comes the fun part, the form design. So they took the basic Microsoft Forms designer that we've been able to use as part of Forms in OneDrive for years and took those kind of same concepts and brought them into the approval process. So you'll notice here, these are 3 questions that were asked, right? What's the department, the reason, the date, and again, this one was a vehicle application in this case. But you'll notice I could add as many questions as I want, and you'll notice the different types. So there's choice, there's text, there's date, and then you can also specify whether or not they're required fields or optional fields, and it allows you to kind of build out that form throughout. The first question most people have is, can I do like dynamic items? If they select this, then show this. That piece doesn't exist inside the form designer, so it is a static form. And these are the only 3 types that do exist, but you'll be able to then go ahead and create that list of different type of questions. And here you can see we're adding another question. You have the ability to move it up, down, copy, paste. Support for multiple answers is allowed, and then we have the required as well. The last one is the workflow settings. I couldn't find an actual screenshot of that, so I will paint you an absolutely beautiful picture. You pick who approves it, and that's pretty much it. So you choose whether or not who the approvers are by default, or if you allow the user to pick their own approvers when they're using the template. So you have either option in that case, and you have that same question of whether or not everyone should approve it or if only one person needs to approve it. So once you have that information, then from an end user, when they go and they select that template, right? So in this case, they did new approval request, and they will see the template will appear in the list, and they go ahead and pick it. And here you'll see, right, we picked sales, our reason, the date, and you'll notice that in this case, there were 2 approvers that were selected, and responses are required by both of them in order for this template to continue. So that is it for the template piece. So I'll take a pause, grab some water, see if anyone has any questions around templates. I'm excited about the templates because it gives a lot of flexibility that you don't have today to create repeatable known responses. All right.
Hey, Richard, there was a question in there, and it's not related to the template side of things and setting this up, but it is related to, is there, can you show how it captures electronic signatures and discuss how that works, if that's even a possibility with the approval side of things?
Yeah, so let me go back, jump back to approvals here real quick. So the first thing you do have to have an Adobe. I don't have an Adobe Sign account, unfortunately. I could probably like create one real quick. But it basically just links the approval request back to Adobe Sign. So it forces them through the Adobe signature process so that they have the verifiable signature is how it works. So that's the basic concept.
Yeah, and that's doing the automation and connecting to Adobe Sign. And I know there is another app you could actually just install that then makes it available right in Teams. So there's a couple ways to be able to do that.
Right.
I think personally the automation piece I think feels really good as far as being able to control it on our side and then setting it over. But yes, you do have to have that license on the Adobe side to be able to handle it.
Lynette asks, can the approvers be set on the value of the form? The answer is yes. When we come back to this idea of the templates, in the workflow settings on this page right here, which I couldn't find a screenshot online, it gives you the same exact view as though you were creating this, right? So this part right here where you enter approvers and whether or not you require all of them, that's what's available underneath the workflow section. So you can pick as many approvers, or you can leave it blank. That's the other thing. You can specify no approvers and let the person who's putting the request and choose who that approver is. I think there's probably less value in that in a template personally, but it's good that Microsoft's giving us the flexibility to do both of those options right out of the gate. All right. Any other questions on templates? No, they can't be set dynamically or automatically. It's a good question. You would have to create a different template for different sets of approvers at that point in time. But the nice thing is, and again, I kind of they do give you this ability to specify categories, and from the end user perspective, right, they're going to see the list of different items that they're allowed to. So I've seen this screenshot before, so I'm just I'll show you in my tenant, but I won't go too far and get in trouble. So when I do a new one, you'll notice there's this template right here, and then you get the list, right? So this is a custom one I built, right? So you see that custom one that's sitting here. So if you had lots of them, right, you could create lots of different requests at that point in time. All right. Hopefully that kind of helps kind of shed a light on what that looks like. Oh no, I lost my window. Come back. There it is. Okay, cool. All right. Any other questions making sense so far? All right. Cool. All right. So what we want to do now is we've talked about kind of, a basic. So let's kind of take this the next level up, right? How do we integrate this, right, this experience inside of Teams, but let's take it kind of the next step up, right? So it's cool that an end user can, click that, but, I want to send this through Power Automate. I want to be able to, specify and kind of do some of these templatey kind of features, but do them via Power Automate, but then still use approvals as my process. So we're going to have our information sit in SharePoint, and we're going to use Power Automate to key off of a list, and then we'll send the approval via Power Automate, get our notifications, and do all sorts of fun stuff. So in order to pull this off, we need a couple of things. I've got flow sitting here. Throw that over here. And we got some site content. All right. So the first thing I did, and we'll talk about these other three in a moment because they are for different things, but I'm going to create a PTO requests list. So pretty standard process, right? Literally all I did is I came up here and I said, make a new list in SharePoint. I made it blank and I called it PTO requests. That was the only thing you didn't see me do. Inside of this request, I added 3 columns: 1, a start date, an end date, and then we do this internally at our work, details for jealousy. So that's an optional field, so you can share anywhere fun that you might be going. All right. So those are the 3 things we have, and we need a title because there's always a title, so we left it there. All right. So that's our list that we have in SharePoint. So we want to create a new flow. We're going to connect to that list, look for changes, and when something happens, we're going to send out that approval. So I'm going to create a new automated cloud flow. And when an item is created, there it is right there. And we're going to call this demo block. All right, so here's our new one. We're going to hit create. So it's going to ask us, all right, cool, item is created. I'll make this a little bigger for everyone too. So the first thing it's going to ask is, what's the site address? So I'm going to pick the team or the group I just created that list in, and then it's going to ask me what's my list name. So I'm going to say I'm going to use the PTO requests. So we got that going. All right, so now we're watching and we're going to trigger off of that. So our next step is we need to add an approval. So I'm going to search for approval, and here's approvals. And you'll notice we have different options. We could create an approval, which is just going to create one, but we really want to have some sort of like start it and wait because we want to do something with the approval once it's been approved. So I'm going to say start and wait for an approval. You could break them up, obviously, as you can see here, but I'm going to do it in a single step. And then it's going to ask what kind of approval type do we want? Is it approve, reject, where everyone has to reply? Is it first to reply, or do we do custom different options? So I'm just going to pick first to respond because I only need one person. So we're going to call this PTO request. We can enter who it's assigned to. And then in the details, we can go ahead and we can add our details. Now you'll notice it tells us that Markdown support is approved, which allows us to use Markdown. And if you're not familiar with it, it's just a syntax that's used, you see it in GitHub and a lot of developer places. So there is a PTO request waiting from, and then when I click here, I can add dynamic content. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find created by display name. So it's going to say this is a PTO request. And again, there's Markdown support. So I guess let's make it do something cool with it. So 2 pounds is a header. Then we'll do start date. Again, I will come find my start date. And what's neat is you're going to see, right, that the items, those fields that we talked about before, here they are: title, start date, end date, details. So I'm going to hit start date, end date, and all right, cool. All right, so now we have an approval. But what we need to is we want to take an action on this. That's kind of the next phase of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new step and we're going to create a condition. This is where it's kind of interesting. That's kind of why I wanted to show you live. So I'm going to say I want to choose a value. And there's one item I want to point out because it's pretty important here. You'll notice that as I look at this, this is start and wait for approval, which applies back to this section. And if I scroll all the way down, you'll see when item is created is there. One of the things when you're creating larger Power Automates, it's always good to rename these to things that make sense, right? Item added to PTO request. So as soon as I do that rename and I come back down here and I scroll down, you're going to see that it's now been updated. So when you have a lot of stuff on the screen, it helps to rename them so that you can easily find them. So I'm going to come down here and I'm looking for, I need to know the approval status, right? That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to find responses approver response. Kind of weird. And when I click on that, it's suddenly going to change it. If you notice that, we went from condition to apply to each. So let me do that again real quick so you can kind of see how fast that happened. So I hit new step, do condition again. And I'm going to find this again, response, approver, response, and it flips it to apply to each. And the reason for this is an array, right? If you think about it, you could have more than one person be in the approval process. So maybe, you're going to loop through all those approvals till you get all of them back and then take an action. Well, in our case, remember, we just said we just want one approver. So as soon as we get one that says it's good, then we're fine. So if I come back to condition, right, and here this pop-up is telling you, hey, we did this because, that's an array. So now this is response, and I'm just going to say approve. And that was the default. If you look back here, remember it was, oops, I went too far. Approve, reject is the language here. So if it's approved, what do we do? All right, so we're gonna send an email message. So if yes, we're gonna send this to, and here again, we're gonna scroll all the way down and you're gonna see item added to PTO request. And you'll notice in here, created by email at this point in time, subject, PTO approved. And again, you still have all these variables to you. So if you wanted to, right, I could come all the way back here and find, titles and created by and all that kind of fun stuff. I don't care that much. So we'll just do that. And then obviously if they say no, we got to do something too. So we'll also send an email. And again, we're going to scroll down and find created by email again. PTO denied. Sorry, we really need you at work. So there we go. Now we have our request. So again, we're going to watch an item get requested, start and wait for that approval option, and then on each yes, no, in this case, we're going to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save at the top. It would tell me if there was any errors, tells me there aren't any. So I'm going to go ahead and hit test. And I'm going to do a manual test on this. So we're going to come back to my Teams client. This one. So what I did, I think I left it there. And if not, I'll add it back. Okay. So I added a list to teams. I'll go ahead and remove this just so you can kind of see this. So I'm going to tell everyone, hey, for PTO requests, I want you to come to this team, right? We're going to add an item. There are lists. It's going to let me choose from an existing list. So I'll hit save here and I'll say, give me an existing list. I want PTO requests. And it's just going to add it to the top. So I'm going to add a new item. I'm that person. I'm going to ask for a PTO request. Start date is tomorrow. We're going to have it end on the 5th and somewhere warm. That's it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So if we come back over here, I've added an item to the list. Power Automate is now going to start watching for it. Hey, there, it picked it up. And now it's going to start that approval process. So I'm going to get this window out of the way so we can come back over here, and you'll remember this guy over here is my approver. And you'll notice, hey, there was a request that was sent in from the 3rd to the 5th, somewhere warm. Do you approve it or not? In addition to receiving this in Teams, I will get an email as well with the same information, so I could approve it from email as well if I wanted to, but I want to do this from Teams because Teams is cool. So I'm going to go ahead and hit approve. And as that cranks away, now it's approved. If I came back to this email will actually update as well in a second and show me that it's already approved. I got to click off of it. Don't think about it. Oh, there it goes. It's been approved. And if I come back, right, this is where I request it from. Hey, look, my approval for PTO has been approved. And I also have an email that says the same thing. Congrats, your PTO is approved. So there we go. We built a really simple kind of process to be able to handle that PTO request. So if we look back at, what we were trying to do, we wanted a user, we want them to be able to request the PTO in SharePoint. We're going to use Power Automate. We're going to send that approval and we'll get a notification and we're done. All right. So what does that take for us, right? So in this case, we're triggering that out of Power Automate and we're able to notify multiple people, but we didn't have any type of like multi-level approval process or anything else like that in this example. We kept it pretty simple, but you'll notice we didn't have to like go write any code or anything else like that. We were able to just go ahead and create our Power Automate and approvals example together to create that PTO process. Any questions at this point in time? Hopefully this is somewhat interesting to people. All right. So what I want to do now is we want to take this up kind of the next level. So it's cool. We made a PTO request, but there's some problems with it, right? So if you think about it, if I came to this team and I looked, right, like this request is still sitting here. So the next person who comes along, right, like if I come in here as this user and I look at that same thing, I'm going to see these requests all kind of piled up. So I should take some sort of action against these items, right? And there wasn't much visibility to it. There's probably a lot of other checks and balances we could do. So let's kind of take this to the next level and kind of look at, how would we make this a little fancier? So we're going to have a request come in, but we should really ask the end user, are you really sure those are the days you want to request off? Right? There's all sorts of reasons. Maybe they entered it wrong. It gives them an opportunity to kind of, verify that information. The next piece is, we've been hard coding in who these requests go to, but that doesn't make any sense because why would we do that? So we're going to go look up who their manager is based on the approval, and then we'll send it to the manager for that approval process. But I want you to be able to see kind of more of the power of it. So we're going to add even a little bit more fun to it. So before we do that, we also want to look up and say, how many hours are available for this person? Do they still have time to be able to take off for PTO? I have no clue. And again, we've got to be able to keep track of all these PTO requests, but we don't want everyone else to see everyone else's request because it's kind of like not good manners to like show other people their PTO requests and then denied ones. So we've got to do something with that. And then if it is approved, we should tell other people. So we should go ahead and like put that on a calendar or something. So we're going to build all of these pieces in a single Power Automate. So we're going to get multi-level approval. We're going to do some lookups along the way and kind of make this a little bit more full-fledged. So to be able to do that, we need a bit more pieces laying around. So we created that first item, the PTO requests. So there's that one sitting there still. I'm just going to get rid of it because we don't need it anymore. But we're going to create a couple other items. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create kind of a bucket for processed items, right? So as items come in, were they processed? Have they been approved, right? And that way we could move them from our initial approval list into a new one. So we're going to keep track of who requested it, their start date, the end date, any notes they put in, and then whether or not it's been approved or processed yet. So we'll build all that kind of stuff out. In addition to that, we need to have a list of how many hours or how many days are remaining. I wrote hours. Whoops. How many days are remaining? So my user's got 15. So you'd have a list of people and how much time they have left to take off. And the last item we need is we need a calendar, right? So the great thing is SharePoint allows you to create lists. So this is a list with start date and an end date. That's it. And one of the views they have when you create a new view is calendar view. So it'll build you a really pretty calendar like this. So you don't have to do much for a calendar. You just have to put it on a list. So now with those 4 pieces, now we can go build something much cooler. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to back up. Yep, thank you. And I'm going to turn this one off real quick. This is my favorite note of all time. By the way, as a side note, anytime you turn it off, it tells you that they think there's something wrong with this flow. And if you go to the flow checker, it tells you it's turned off. It's kind of funny. All right, so we're going to create a new one. So I'm going to create again from a blank page. And this one's going to be, you know, we're going to kind of follow the same way, but we're going to have to add a few things along the way. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this demo run. Okay. We're going to create this. And this beginning part is going to look exactly the same. So we're going to pick that same group and we're going to pick our PTO requests. All right. So the first thing we said is, you know, we want to be able to look up the number of hours that are in that. So we need some way to do a lookup. So I'm going to go ahead and say, add me a new list. Before I do that, I'm going to rename this real quick. Request. And so we're going to do a there we go. And I want to get items. There we go. All right. So we're going to then pick our thing. We're going to pick our group again, but now this time we're going to say, I want to know how many PTO hours are remaining. And if I expand this out, there's going to be this filter. And this allows me to go ahead and look up information. So you'll notice if I come back here real quick, in the title column, I put the person's email address so that I could, in the filter then, say where the title is equal to, I come down here, find the created by email, just like that. And there, now I've looked up that person's, the number of hours they have remaining, okay? But I've got like all of them. So I've got to do, you know, I've got to limit that down again. And this becomes, again, that idea of, right, like we have potentially lots of people that might have come back inadvertently. So we need to put this into a variable. And this is where you start getting into a little bit more fancy. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to add an action, I'm going to say variable. It's going to think, there we go. And I'm going to initialize a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and call this days remaining. It is, it's a string in there right now, and I'm just going to leave it blank because what we really want to do is we want to set that variable to what comes out of this get items. So we're going to do the new step again. We're going to say variable, and we're going to then set the variable, and we'll pick it. We'll pick the variable name. So under get items, I can then pull the item that I want out of here. If I scroll down, oops. And then it's going to do the same thing. So you'll notice again, remember this happened before, it says to apply to each because it could be multiple items that are coming back. Well, now I can just pull individual items out of my list at this point in time. So then I can go find hours remaining. So let's get that out of there, and there we go. So now by doing that, I've now looked up how many hours are remaining when I do this. So take a step back. So I've got my initial request, it comes in, I create this variable called days remaining. I get the item, right? Because I need to look it up, and then I have that piece. So there we go. I've done the first part. I've looked up how many hours are remaining for that person, and I know exactly that, so I can put it in the request. So the second part we said is back here, we said, hey, we want to confirm with the user, are you absolutely sure you want to take that time off? So we're going to add a step, and we're again use an approval. And we're going to start and wait for one. And first to respond, verify PTO request. And who is it assigned to? Well, we want to assign it back to ourselves. So I can scroll all the way down, right? Here's our item added to PTO, created by email. So I just assign it to myself. PTO, start date. Again, I can start pulling this stuff out from below. End date, like this. All right, so now we're gonna ask ourselves, hey, were those the actual times you wanted? And this is now gets familiar. So we hit condition, we come in here, we're gonna, again, start and wait for approval is what we called it. I didn't rename it because I want you to see why it's important to rename stuff here soon. And if it's approved, we do something. So if it's no, right, what are we gonna do? They didn't really mean to do that. Well, simple. We're just going to go delete an item then. So we're just going to pull that thing out right out of the list. So we're going to come down here. We're going to find delete item. It's going to say where. So we just pick our item, pick our SharePoint list. So our PTO requests. It's going to ask for the ID. And the great thing is, so we rename this add item to PTO request up here. So if I just look, here's item add to PTO request, here's the ID. And just by adding that, it's just going to reach out and it's going to delete that item for us. Done. Well, if they say yes, that's where we want to start doing, you know, the other fun stuff. So that's where we're going to add our check with the manager, right? Just grabbing my notes here to make sure I do this right. I hate to goof this up. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we said yes, so we're going to create a new item. And why we're doing this is we want to take the request out of this one and we're going to put it into the processed bucket because we want to remove it from here and add it to there so not everyone in the world sees that PTO request just kind of floating around out there. So I'm going to create a new item and we're going to come in here. We're going to say PTO request process, and then I'm just going to be able to fill in all the pieces, right? So I just got to scroll all the way down to the bottom to find my items. Gotta make sure I'm in the right one here. There it is. So there's my title, requested by, I want the email address, start date, end date, the notes for jealousy. And then it hasn't been approved yet, so I'm going to say no, and it hasn't been processed yet either because we just kind of threw it in there. So there we go. So the first thing we do is we create it, and then now we can go look up who the manager is. So get manager. And it's going to ask, who am I looking this up for, right? Who's the individual? So, well, I know the created by email, right? So I can come all the way down here again, still, add item to PTO, created by email, and that will give me that information. So now I have who the manager is, and we'll use this later on then in the approval. And then the last bit, we're going to delete an item because we got to get that item out of our initial place. So delete item. Come here, SharePoint list. So we're going to delete it out of the PTO requests again. And there we go. Okay, we got lots of pieces moving here all of a sudden. So request comes in, we set some variables, find out how much time, and then we decide what we want to do with it. So one of the important things I always tell people is you go through this process, you want to take breaks and test often, right? Because if you do 1,000 different things, right, and we probably went even too far at this point in time, it's really easy to test over and over again. So I'm going to hit test manual. So I'm now looking at it, and then I'm just going to go back to my user, and I'm going to go ahead and put that request in again. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to say new item, PTO request, start date is going to be next week, end date will be next week, fun, and then I'm going to hit save. And what's great about it is it's now going to walk through this entire process, and we're going to be able to see step by step each item. And more importantly, it's also going to be able to, we'll be able to see what the variables are and all that kind of fun stuff. So you'll notice here, right, we initialize that variable. Well, how many time is left, right? So we set the variable here, and hey, look, it figured out, right, that we have 15 remaining. So now we have that information here that we can easily go to. And now it's going to sit and wait at that first level of PTO. So if I come back here, right, to my user, and this is again, I'm requesting back to myself, hey, are you really sure that you wanted to do this time? Yep, I did. So I'm going to go ahead and hit approve. And it's going to come over here. It's going to wait a second. It's going to pick up where I left off, and it's going to go off to the races and finish it. So we apply to each the condition. Now we said yes, right? So we created an item. We got our manager. If I click on here, you'll notice, right? That was my input. There's my output. So I can see who the manager is for this user. And then at this point in time, we just deleted it for the sake of cleaning things up. So in theory, if I go to PTO process request, there should be an item there. There it is. If I look back at my PTO request itself, you'll notice it's blank. So we've gone ahead and we've cleaned up that process. Any questions so far? Thoughts? Hopefully this is giving you, I wanted to give you this example to start getting your mind kind of working. What are the different ways you could use approvals in your organization? Because I think people oftentimes think of it as kind of just a one and done scenario, but you can really build on top of each other throughout this entire process. Stephen asks, pros and cons of using, one list versus different lists. For me, I wanted to use at least two at a bare minimum, because I don't want everybody in the company to know everyone who requested PTO, which was approved and rejected. So I don't know if, there's probably some sort of like HIPAA or legal reasons not to do that too. So what I would do, right, is I would build this in a separate one, but I would restrict this list here, for example, so not everyone could go and look at it. So that, it was only limited to like an admin or to whoever was doing it. So at a bare minimum, I would have two. These ones are just out there for fun to kind of just show you that kind of demo. Can the PTO hours get updated in this process? Absolutely they can. And that's kind of the fun part of it, is that as we go through it, right, we could then take the next step, and I'll show you, we'll kind of continue to walk through this, how you could then manipulate that. Set up a list so only admins and the item creators. You would absolutely want to, like, PTO requests would be open to everyone in this scenario. This PTO requested process and the hours remaining, those ones would be locked down to only admins. And the other thing to keep in mind is you wouldn't necessarily, if you think about it, right, when I was in here picking these items, let me go ahead and hit edit real quick again. Like when I did that get items, I picked the site and the list that I was pulling this from. They don't have to be in the same team, right? You could have a whole nother team that's just like, where you've stored extra stuff, or a different group. It doesn't even have to be a team at that point in time, right? It's just a SharePoint site where you just have administrative lists floating around where you keep those items that, you know, you have no chance of anyone ever kind of bumping into them. So that, you know, hopefully that kind of helps understand that piece. All right. Any other questions? All right. So I kind of, let's see, wish there was a way. Oh, okay, here we go. Sorry. I meant setting the list settings. So the items can only be viewed by the person. Oh, I got it. Yeah, you could go that route as well. That's absolutely, Chris, you are right. You could go that way and just limit the view items from that perspective. That's another way to slice that one up. Yeah, so, and Kirk is right, and this is an important thing, and I was going to call this out at the end. So I'm logged in as myself at this point in time, all right? Because, and the it's awesome because, hey, I'm logged in, but the bad part about it is if I go look at my Teams account right now, and I've got a machine sitting here off to the side, logged in as myself, right? Every single PTO request that comes through is getting this back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And I'm going to see this show up in all of my Teams requests because I built all this logged in as my user. So I didn't call it out at the beginning, but Chris is 100%, or Kirk is 100% right. If you were doing this for real, you would go build a service account and you would build this underneath a service account so that you didn't have all these processes tied to a specific person. Now that's going to cost you, you know, the $15 a month for a license for Flow at that point in time, or Power Automate at that point in time. But I think, you know, it's worth it in that scenario, right? If you were a super small shop, I guess you could do that. Keep it under a person, but I just think you would lose your mind watching all the automations come in and out, right? And Christina's right. You can, right, under certain licenses, you can, you know, transfer and move and put these into team accounts and stuff like that. I will not pretend to be a licensing expert in Microsoft because I don't think any of them exist, to be honest. Because I always get different answers. All right. Any other questions? Good stuff so far. All right, so let's take this to the next step then. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add, we need to add the next approval, right? So all we've done so far is checked it ourselves. If I can spell. There we go. So we're going to start and wait an approval. We're going to do the same thing, first to respond. Now, this is a PTO request, but now who it's assigned to, this is the important part. Remember, up here in Get Manager, we got the UPN. So here's my Get Manager. And when I scroll through this, I'm going to find the user principal name right here, which is the same as their, well, not necessarily, but should be the same as their email. So then I have details, right? So PTO requests needs approval. So the following person, and again, I can come all the way down to the bottom, and you'll notice they just keep building on top of each other, right? So the stuff at the very top is going to be at the bottom. Created by display name, 4, and start date, end date, notes, hours, days remaining. And this is going to be at the top because we put this in a variable, and there we go. So now this is going to get sent to my manager. They're going to see the start date, the end date, the notes, and the days remaining. How nifty is that? All right. Now you could get fancier, right? So one of the things, and as a side note, just so everyone who's following along, yes, you're gonna get the PowerPoint at the end, and I'm gonna write a blog article on this after this. I started writing it, I'll post it, basically walking through the written steps on how to do all this kind of stuff. So one of the fun things I was like, well, if I'm the manager, I see the days remaining. I don't have to do the mental math in my head, like how many days did they request and how many are remaining. So I'm going to create a request, another variable way up here at the top. So I'm going to initialize a variable, and so this is going to be days requested temp, and you'll see why here in a second, why I called it temp. And what we're going to do is I've got a little bit of math here. And what this is telling me is we're going to calculate the number of days that were left. Now, Power Automate doesn't have anything built for it already. So they have this thing subtracting. So you have to take the date and you have to put it into ticks, which is like Unix time. And then you compare the number of ticks from the end date to the start date times by this crazy math. And that gives you the amount of time that is remaining or requested. So I just want to make sure that I got my start date correct. Okay. And I didn't hit save. Dang it. Do that again. Oh, do that all the time. I always put it in the search box and I forget to hit OK. There we go. All right, so now I have the days requested. So I'm going to rename this to variable days requested temp. And the reason I did this temp is this again is a little weird. This is going to figure out the number of days, but it's going to be short one because if you do the math in your head, it's going to, if I do it from Monday to Friday, it's going to return back 4 because it's going to figure out the numbers between. I haven't figured out how to do it in one call. I'm sure there's some super clever way of doing it, but I haven't figured it out yet. So all I did, this is how I cheated when I did this. I created another variable, initialize a new variable called days requested. It's an int. And this time what I did is we're just going to do some math. And I'm going to take the days requested variable above and I'm going to add it to the number 1. There we go. So adding 1 to it. So theoretically, if I pick 5 days, I should now get 5 days out of here. So I'm going to rename this variable days requested. Okay. So then if I come down here, come all the way back to where we started this, and I ask for approval, days remaining, then I could say days requested, and I could pick days requested like that. So now I'd see both as the manager. So we need a condition. Now we're going to get again our if then statement. This is where it starts to, I've been not renaming these things just so you can kind of get a sense of why renaming is important. So here's start and await for approval to, right? That's what it's called right there. So I'd find again, responses approver response, and it's going to change this into an apply to each statement. And we're going to do it again. And there we go. So now it's approved. Cool. Well, once it's approved, what do we do? Well, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to send an email. Say, and again, who are we sending this to? Scroll all the way to the bottom. And I'll tell you another hint here in a bit. Created by email, PTO approved. And I could put in, again, I could pull that information I did before, but I'm just going to say your manager has approved. If no, we're going to send an email. And you should always have something on both sides. Don't leave one side ever blank. Just bad things can happen. I don't even know if I'm there. Yep, I am. Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, so there we go. It's approved, it's denied. Then we're going to add another action. And remember, we said we wanted to put this on that calendar. So I'm going to create an item. I'm going to put it, oops, got to pick my team first. SharePoint list. There's my calendar. And then the title, and we're just going to pull this again right from the start of it. Title. Oh, actually, we want the person who requested it. We don't want the title, we want the name. Did I go by it? Yeah, there it is. Create by display name. Start date, end date. And then the last piece, we're going to go update an item. Update item. And we're going to pick the processed one. So PTO request processed. We need the ID. This is created way up here, right here. Create item is what it was called. Again, see, bad idea not renaming stuff. And we're just going to put in the same fields that were there before. But what we're really trying to get to down here is this approved processed stuff. So this is requested by, start date, end date, and the notes. I think I got all the right fields picked, but I hope so. I have a working one for real, so it doesn't matter. All right, there it's saved. It thinks it's right. Cool. Let's hit test and see what happens. So there it goes. So let me get the right person back. Here we go. So we're gonna go back to my team. Here's my PTO requests. So I'm gonna say new item, start date. We're gonna do it next week. We're gonna pick 4 days here. And I'm gonna hit save. All right. So it's gonna pick up this change here in a moment. And if I did everything right, it's gonna work great. If it blows up, I have a working one set off to the side. All right, so here's the first thing I wanted to show. So get days requested temp, right? So you remember we picked 4 days, but because of how the math works in ticks, it thinks it's only 3. So we took that variable, we figured out 3, and we added 1 to get to 4. And that's why we did that whole added math piece. So now it's waiting for approval. So again, this is back to our cells. So we're proving our own thing to say, hey, are we sure? And realistically, right, we should have probably updated this field to say, hey, you requested 5 days or 4 days, you have 15 days remaining. Are you sure you want to? Right, that's kind of the whole idea. So I hit approve. I come back over here. It's now gonna continue to kick off and do its fun thing. Here we go. So it's been approved. This is where it might crash and burn. And I'll tell you why in a second, if it does. Or if anyone online already knows why it might crash and burn, you can tell me too. All right, I leave side blanks. Oh, so the only reason to I don't like leaving sides blanks is I don't know if something was done, right? I like to have some sort of action just to make sure that, you know, something happened. I cleaned up the process, whatever the case might be. It's not like the world's going to come to an end if you don't do it or anything like that. So this thing is going to fail. I'm going to let it spin and do its thing and fail. And the reason why, and I'll show you, I'm going to pull over this screen. So when we did this part up here, right? So we created the item, right? If yes, so we put in the process, we get the manager, and then we said, hey, we want to delete it from the initial. So we deleted it from all the way up here in this initial creation piece. Well, when we came in here and we set an approval, we went and re-referenced items that were up all the way from this item, right? Well, the problem is we just deleted that item right above it. And this is kind of one of those important things. If you delete it midstream, it doesn't hold that information in memory. So even though we saw that in the list over and over again, it was gone. So we can't actually use it again. So it's going to just kind of sit here and grind, like basically forever, until it kind of poops out and dies. And I can try to approve it here, and eventually it should crash out because it's going to freak out about missing stuff from above. So the item, and the reason I did it this way, is sometimes it's valuable to apply additional variables. So you'll remember, right, we kept reusing over and over again the display name and the email address. Like we use those, you know, a bunch of times throughout. So instead of referencing over and over again, what we can do is we can put that item into a variable right out of the gate, and you've got to do them up at the top of your flow. But now I've got this email variable, so regardless of where I am, even if I'm all the way down here, buried, you know, 20 feet deep, right, I have this requested by email variable. So when I look at this, right, even though I deleted the item, and if I come all the way down here, right, here's that initial created item, initial creation, you'll notice, right, like this thing is deleted, so you really can't access that object like you think you can anymore. So you want to put those items into a variable so that you kind of have those for later on. Let's see if it ever, oh, it did, it actually fit. I didn't actually, oh, look at that, it finished, yay. All right, let me get back over here. We got too many windows open. Okay, so I don't remember who asked, right? Could you do other things in here? So, well, I guess before I do that, let me just prove and make sure that everything worked like I said it was going to. So if I go to the PTO calendar now, and I go to the next day, there's my PTO request. You can see that there is the person who requested it through those 4 days, all that kind of fun stuff. And if I go back to PTO requests, it's empty. And if I go look at site contents, because I didn't put it in the thing, and I say PTO requests, if I did it right, cool, I did it right, and then you'll notice it's approved and processed. So at this point in time, right, I would finish the other side doing the same thing. If it was denied, I would send an email saying it's denied. I would update the item, but this time I would say approved no, process yes. And if I wanted to, I could keep going down this flow, right? So if it was approved, right, I could add another item to go update the hours remaining table I have here and decrease this from 15 down 4. So I could update this to 9, for example. So then I could continue that kind of running track. And then if I wanted, then, you know, the next logical piece is, well, then we'd probably want to add something, you know, up at the top that says, hey, you requested this many hours, right? Do you have enough hours remaining to be able to do this? And if the answer is no, right, we wouldn't even ask the person, hey, you know, do you want to have that time off? We would just deny it immediately and say, I'm sorry, you're out. You don't have enough time for this length of time. So we just cancel your PTO request immediately. So you can kind of start getting a feel of, you know, this significantly more complex, and it looks spooky, right? So back this out so you can actually see it all on one screen, right? Like it can get big, it can start to feel daunting, but the trick I always tell people is, right, you want to start with something, right? Lay it out in this kind of view in a simple flow chart, so you can start mentally kind of thinking to yourself, all right, I'm going to need somewhere to keep track of the requests. I'm going to need somewhere to keep track of the of it being processed. I need somewhere to look up hours. I'll need something for a calendar, so on and so forth. So you start getting those different buckets of information you need, and then you can start building out this process. Because here's the one thing the reason you really want to do this is if I decided I came through all of this, I was like, sweet, now I want to add some sort of other approval way up here in the process. When I do that, it's going to like insert itself above all of this, and it's not going to be in my stepped ladder anymore. And although they do offer a copy to clipboard feature to try to move things around, it does not always work 100% of the time, especially when you've got lots of nested items. So you might start seeing some kind of funky, weird behavior at that point in time. So we got through the demo. Look at that. It worked in real time even. So hopefully you can kind of start seeing some of the power of this approval process and how you could use Power Automate to amplify that, to be able to create really cool workflows throughout your organization. So anything that requires approval. So you know, if you start thinking about the different scenarios, items that are dropped into maybe a files uploaded into a OneDrive folder that needs approval, you could have that go out to someone, have them give the approval, move the file from point A to point B, and do all this automation. And code we wrote, the biggest amount of code I wrote in this entire thing was these two items where, and I didn't know what these were. I jumped out on the internet and started, doing some Bing Fu and found myself a way to find that information. But those were the only two pieces. Everything else through this entire piece was just, dropping and dragging and bringing stuff in. So any questions, thoughts, other things I haven't got to? I don't think there's anything else I missed in the chat. Cool. Don, that's what I had.
Awesome. Yeah, some really, really good stuff, Richard. Oh, here we go. Clark got another one.
Any way to add comments to the flow? No, not really. Like, I would love that. That's a great idea, actually, to be able to come in. I've never seen anything to like, how neat would that be to have like a comments field?
Well, I mean, if you're developing, that's typically what you do anyway. So this would make sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a ton of sense. I was just trying to think of if there's anything you could like use as a pseudo comment, like something that doesn't really do much.
Like a field that doesn't really do anything.
Just some. I mean, I guess you could. I mean, you could just put a variable in.
Yeah,
right?
a blank variable and just say, put a little note there.
Yep, exactly. Just initialize a variable, string, and then, and then you could rename it too, right? Comments. Right, not the cleanest thing in the world, probably like against every rule under the book, but
agreed.
It at least gets you somewhere. It gets you from point A to point B. That's a great idea, though. I will. I'm writing that down to submit said feedback to the Power Automate team because I think that would be interesting. Because I think you're right, 100%, Clark. Right? Like, we use this term citizen developer all the time, and a citizen developer could probably easily understand, this because it's like 2 steps, right? But once you start getting into some of these crazy, more complex ones, obviously, it gets just a little harder to keep track of. So great idea. Use variables for now. That's my suggestion. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well,
excellent. Thank you, Richard.
Absolutely. Remember to fill out the survey, win some money.
Absolutely. And then before everybody else goes, go ahead, Richard. You can take care. We are doing a pick of somebody in this particular session. So I grabbed everybody's name and we're going to be giving out an Amazon gift card to that lucky person. So let me get my wheels spinning here. So give me a second.
Oh, yeah. Craig is right. You can add a note. That's right. It doesn't.
Oh, there is a. Oh.
Yeah, Craig is right. I forgot. Hold on. Let me show it. I always forget about it. Good call. The problem I have with it, I've used this before. And this is why I always forget about it. I want the note to appear on the side. It's like one of those, right? Like I want it to bubble out and be right here. Otherwise, I have to click into every single one. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but good call. Good reminder. Yes, there is the note. I always forget about it because I don't use it.
Perfect.
All right.
All right.
Okay,